Hidden Gems, Episode 10, Tasty Moorsels. Welcome to Hidden Gems, a board game podcast where we review unusual, forgotten, and underappreciated board games. We're your hosts. My name is Chris.
I'm Jason.
And I'm Cameron. Thanks for listening to our show.
Yes, welcome back, folks, as always.
All right.
Yes. Today is a special day.
It is.
Gentlemen. Today is a milestone in the podcast. We've had a few different special guests on so far. We've had Mike Baglio, Mr. Bill Arney, and today we're privileged to have the first of our wives make an appearance on the show. My wife, Talia. Welcome to the podcast, babe.
Hey.
Welcome.
Welcome, Talia.
It's awesome. This is a big moment. I know she is excited to be here. She wanted to ride on the coattails of the fame of our podcast now that we're, getting recognized in supermarkets and you just can't even live a normal life now. I can't even go out to eat, just getting swarmed by fans. We're probably going to get mobbed in the airport next week, but it just comes with the territory, right?
All three of our fans.
Yeah.
And also the added benefit of now she is also a nerd for being a podcast
That's right.
contributor about board games.
No.
Talia Alley,
This was not
podcast,
explained to me beforehand.
board game podcast influencer.
You stepped across the threshold.
She
There's no going back.
She thought it was when she was forced to play D&D, but now it's that she's in a board game podcast. There's no turning back now.
That's right. You're just one of the nerds now.
Nope.
And by the way, folks, I was joking about that. We're not actually being mobbed by adoring fans, at least not
don't
yet.
get
Do you really think you need to explain that?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Thank you.
No, I'll say that's going to be a big moment for me if that ever happens where one of us actually gets recognized somewhere, but
Right.
that's a long ways off.
Is that your dream?
We're going to have to go somewhere much nerdier than the grocery store, I think.
That's true.
Maybe at Origins.
Yeah, maybe we'll eventually get to a convention at some point. That'd be
Maybe.
fun. Get all be real big nerds and wear our Hidden Gems t-shirts.
That's right, wearing our merch.
Yeah.
All right, well, like I said, it's awesome to have my wife Talia on the show, wife of 16 years, right? See, you don't even know. See, that makes you feel even
We got
better.
married in 2005.
So
that's
Yeah,
right.
that-
all a
That's
blur
16.
now.
Yeah, that was risky.
It was risky.
It was.
You're lucky that she didn't remember,
You
too.
know me, I take risks. So as we always do, and we have our special guests on, we like to give you just a moment to tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your gaming background, if you please.
Let's see. Gaming background, I guess, is similar to Chris's. When I started playing board games was when you were in med school, I guess.
think so.
Settlers of Catan.
With the Laytons.
With the Laytons, and we played a lot of Settlers.
We did. We
Which
played a
I
lot.
enjoyed. I guess we didn't play a lot of board games when you were in residency because you were busy.
What are some other games that you've played and enjoyed besides just Settlers of Catan? That's a game that everyone's maybe familiar with. Have you played any lesser known games that you enjoyed?
Our favorite card game we played a lot. Cannot remember the name of it currently.
Hanabi?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We played a lot of Hanabi.
We did.
A lot.
Yeah.
Hanabi.
We actually got quite good at that game. So if
We
you're
did.
familiar
Yeah.
with Hanabi, we got a perfect score several times, and we actually got to the point where we incorporated in the 6th suit, I believe.
Yeah, the rainbow
rainbow.
suit.
The rainbow suit. And if not perfect on that one, we got pretty darn close a couple of times,
Wow.
if I remember right.
It's a big deal.
Probably why we stopped playing it because after a while you just
Kind of mastered it.
Yeah.
Kind of
So-
had that language going.
Casey and I actually played Hanabi on our first date.
I did know that.
oh,
Yeah.
Yes.
that's cool.
Yeah,
that's
which
awesome.
I only learned about from playing with you guys.
Yep, that's right.
Such a good two-person.
Awesome game.
So when you're not raising 4 boys and playing board games with your husband, what other kind of things do you enjoy doing?
What do I like to do in my spare time? Let's see. I like to watch a lot of shows. I have an obscene amount of shows that I watch. It's kind of embarrassing, to be honest, and some that probably no one else watches anymore, like Grey's Anatomy. Don't judge me, okay? Been reading a lot lately. And
Yes,
I
you
used
have.
to do that a lot before the kids, but little children don't really allow for reading. So I've been picking that up a lot more. I love a good thriller, a good drama, easy reads. I do not read anything serious.
Nothing philosophical
Nope.
like the
Nope.
Sandman.
Nope, real quick reads, beach reads.
Talia gives me a hard time about my graphic novels. She says they're
do.
not really books.
They're not. They're
That's
not.
insulting.
A large comic.
Yeah,
Sorry, I'm going to get some slack for that.
I would probably agree with you.
Thank you.
Y'all be quiet.
I enjoy them. I'm not knocking on them.
Yeah.
It's just it's a different
It's
medium.
different.
Yeah.
When they're not in paragraphs. It's not a book.
When they say different, that's code for it's too simple, I guess, with my picture books. Whatever.
My books are pretty simple. I think that's about it. I like to shop. I like to drink wine.
Yes, you do.
Cool.
I think just to get to know you a little bit more, because I know you don't like to talk about yourself.
I don't at all.
So I had intentionally planned to force you to talk about yourself more against your will, because I know how much you hate it. I think we have a couple more questions for you. Cameron, do you have any more questions you would want to ask?
I do. You mentioned it, and I was thinking about one of my favorite times that I've ever played games with Talia, and that was when I co-hosted, I believe, Whitney Riddle's birthday party several years ago, running a D&D campaign for her birthday, and she forced all of her friends, including you, to play Dungeons and Dragons together.
That was an awesome
And
night.
personally, I had a blast, and I was wondering if you would like to tell everyone what was the name, race, and class of your first D&D character.
Oh my gosh.
Do you remember?
I have no idea. no idea.
I'm sure Cameron probably
You do,
does.
though.
Do you
For
remember
sure.
what race and class are?
Nope. I remember nothing about it.
I was really hoping that you would remember, because that was a fun night,
Yeah.
and you did so
sorry.
well.
I
And
did.
you
I
did
don't even
for a
remember.
minute. You started to get into it.
I didn't hate it. I think I told Chris that. I didn't hate it. It's not something I would do all the time.
Uh-huh.
But I didn't hate it. I also gave that to you for Valentine's Day one year. Do you remember that? You don't remember?
Yes, I remember.
No, he doesn't.
Yes.
If you saw
I
his
remember
face
it
right. If
vividly.
if only you could see his face.
Wait, you played Dungeons and Dragons with him
No,
for
I gave
Valentine's
him
Day?
a free ticket for me to play Dungeons and Dragons with him and whoever. You don't remember that?
Did I use that ticket?
Yeah, we
I was
played.
going to say, if we've still got one of those laying around, we need to get on that.
Cash that in.
Who was that? I don't remember who it was with.
I don't either. I don't remember that.
We did.
A memorable Valentine's
Yeah.
Day.
apparently it was great.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
I'm
So
doing-
twice. I've played D&D twice.
Oh, that okay.
It's just what Talia was hoping for, that it would get forgotten and lost in a corner
Yeah.
somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome.
It was fun.
Well, I'll just ask you a couple more quick rapid fire questions here
Okay.
from my prepared list.
All right. Wow.
What's your favorite board game?
Come back to it.
What? You can't come back to what's my favorite board game. It's the easiest question.
It is for people to play board games
Just
literally
say
every day of their
Strasbourg
life.
Make googly eyes at you.
Ew. No.
How about
Gross.
Dominion?
No, probably not. Sure, Dominion's great. Alhambra.
Okay, so I'm going to read.
Ooh,
Love
this
okay.
is
I
Alhambra.
do like Alhambra.
Okay, we're
true.
cutting all that. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
What's your favorite board game?
Alhambra.
Okay.
That's too quick. They're going to know.
That's all right. We have an outtake section.
What is your favorite nerdy movie?
Oh, Lord of the Rings.
Nice.
Great answer.
How many games do you think I own?
876.
Way off.
Is it it's grown?
Noted.
There's a personal motivation behind that one.
Right.
On a scale from 1 to 10, with 10 being the most nerdy, how would you rate me when we were dating, and how would you rate me
Oh,
now?
that's a great question. I would probably have rated you a 6 when we were dating, and I'd rate you about a 9 plus right now.
It worked.
That's a great question. We're going to have to save that for whenever Jenny's on the
That's
show.
right.
I'm sure she
So,
would have a
I
strong
totally
opinion
triggered
on
her.
that.
Here's
Very
the follow-up
similar.
question. Did he become more nerdy, or do you think he was hiding how nerdy he was when you were dating?
I think he probably a little of both. I think he probably became more nerdy, but I think also he was hiding it because he liked to be the cool guy on campus
Yeah.
behind
It's true.
his
No.
4.0 GPA.
I really blossomed into my nerddom. And then the last question, most importantly, who is the meanest player in our game group? Yeah.
I'm going to have to say you.
That's a good answer, but I'm sorry. The answer we're looking for is Bill Arney. It's a good try, though.
Okay,
the answer is
okay.
always Bill.
The answer is always
You probably think of him as a very nice and congenial guy.
Yeah. You would actually probably really enjoy playing games with Bill because he's very mean to me in games. Well, thanks for sharing with us, Talia. It's awesome to learn a bit more about you. And you talked a little bit about what you're into now. You said you've been reading some books. How about you guys? What have you guys been into here lately?
Yeah, I was trying to think about that before the show. We recorded our last episode so recently. I'm trying to think of what's actually happened since then.
Has anything changed?
I will say I go in phases with this. but I have been tinkering around with game design.
Yeah.
It's a minor hobby of mine that I like to tinker around with and try to see if I can come up with something. It'll probably never pan out to be anything at all, really, but I have been back into it a little bit. If I ever have anything to share, I will bring it up on the show.
And I'm sure with all the spare time we have when we're not reviewing for the podcast, we'll have time to play test it for you.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Several times.
Several times, yeah. What about you, Cameron?
Yeah, so I think as I've mentioned before on the show, I'm pretty into woodworking, and I recently moved into a place where I've actually got like a pretty good sized shop. And so I've been focusing on building the shop out and acquiring a few more tools. But I also made the decision recently to actually start a woodworking business. Just a small side business. Could become something in the future a little bit bigger, but that remains to be seen. But I've actually been like formally figuring out how to open the business and make plans and
awesome.
doing a lot of drawing of stuff in SketchUp and making plans to actually build what's called a solar kiln for drying lumber. And of course, I'm doing all of this about 2 months ahead of becoming a father for the first time. So
The timing is perfect.
We'll see how much I get done once the little guy arrives.
Lots of life changes.
Yeah.
Children and solar kilns.
Yeah. That's right.
That's typical Cameron right there.
That's right.
Awesome, man. Well, for me, I'm super excited to talk about what I've been into. It's a TV show. I know that whenever I talk about things, I sound like I'm just excited about everything, and I really am. I get very enthusiastic about nerdy things. But this one, folks, is exciting. This show is probably the best show that I've watched and the one that I've binged the most, probably since the first season of Stranger Things.
Wow.
Now, I'm not all the way through it yet because I've had teaching obligations that have been slowing me down. But I started watching Raised by Wolves.
Oh, yeah, you've been talking about starting that for a while.
Yeah. It's as good as I had hoped. It's better than I hoped, actually. Wow. Talia's over here shaking her head.
It's actually not.
Is it a drama or a documentary?
Oh, no. It's a science fiction TV show. So the director of this show is Ridley Scott.
Oh,
if you don't know, Ridley Scott is the director of Alien and Aliens and all of the other iterations.
I knew that. You should be proud of me.
You did know that? And I will say, the feeling that I got when I started watching Raised by Wolves is a very strong Alien feel. If I had not known this was directed by Ridley Scott, I would have a strong suspicion. In fact, this isn't giving away too much, but when I started watching, I actually looked to see if these universes were the same universe.
Oh, huh.
It's that similar.
Wow.
Okay? If these existed in the same timeline. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yeah, so explain the plot. It's like an AI is raising a human child or something, right?
So I'll explain some of the plot points. I got to be careful though because there are spoilers all over the place in this show, but basically the idea is this ship lands on this foreign planet and it's being piloted by 2 androids, okay? And they are being tasked with raising children on this planet because Earth is in a post-apocalyptic war and it's being destroyed completely. So they've been tasked by a group to inhabit that planet and raise life there. But there are also a group of survivors that escape on something known as the Ark. And they are also trying to inhabit the planet. And they're like the religious group, and the android group is the atheist group. Okay? And that's all I'll say about it. If you like a show where you're trying to figure out what is going on here, you're constantly trying to figure out what is going on this planet? What's going on with these androids? Who is the antagonist here? That's really an interesting thing of the show.
What is the smoke monster?
Exactly. Exactly. Right.
We still don't know.
We still don't know. You're trying to figure out who's the villain here. And I'm still not sure. It's very interesting in that way. I love this show. I'm looking forward to finishing it now.
What service is it on?
HBO Max.
Yeah. Okay.
Sweet. Yeah, HBO Max. It's a bit violent.
Means I gotta watch it by myself.
Yeah. There's a lot of...
Casey will not tolerate anything.
Really intense death scenes.
What episode are you on?
I'm on episode 6, I think.
Can't be worse than Invincible.
It's not, because I started watching that too, and you're right. It's totally worse than The Voice. That show is insane.
Yeah.
Over the top. But anyways, Raised by Wolves. Check it out. It's awesome.
It's weird.
So far. It's not weird. Talia watched the first episode. She's I can't do this. Too crazy.
I made it through the whole first episode.
You did. You gave it a good try.
All right, so it's been a while since we've done anything with the mailbag, and we actually had a couple other questions pop up in the guild recently, so I thought it might be good to try to answer some of those. So
let's do it.
The first one comes from James Lamb, and he asked, how many times do you play a game before you make up your mind about it? Does a truly awful first play just make you rule out all others?
I would actually like to go first on this one because I feel like I talk about this a lot with you guys, maybe a little bit more behind the scenes as we're preparing for the show. And we always try to play games certainly more than once. And I frequently do badly on my first play. And so I am really committed to giving a game another try, even if I just completely bomb. Because it's never fun to listen to someone just like trash on a game because they did badly. So usually I try to take an approach that's, well, that was probably me. I probably missed something, or I know that I missed something crucial and figured out what are the rules I had wrong for the first third of the game or something like that. I mean, 3 times is great, but at least a second follow up and just clear the board. Don't try to bring anything into it from how things went last time and just try to play it a pure second time.
Yeah, I feel like, Chris, you give me crap all the time because I'm quick to give my judgment on a game the first time I play it.
This game is broken.
Yeah.
This is a dominant strategy.
Because I love to chime in on that stuff as I'm playing a game, even for the first time. But
In the first round, sometimes.
yeah, during the rules explanation, sometimes.
This is arbitrary.
But I do agree. All that being said, I do for sure do that. But I give games a fair shake, right? I will say all kinds of things about what I think about them on the first play, but I reserve judgment for several plays in. I'd say 2 to 3 plays at least to get a real feel for a game.
Yeah. I think my answer to this question would actually be Tom Vassel's answer to this question. When he's asked how many times you need to play a game to review it, he says enough. And he knows what that is. That might be 1 play, that might be 5 plays, right? I don't think you can say, I play every game 3 times, right? It's just when you feel like you've played it enough to review it.
Yeah.
Now, for me, I like to play them at a minimum 3 times, and I've been pretty spot on with that because I have such a wonderful, generous, understanding wife who lets me play games a lot.
That's right.
Which I appreciate. So at minimum 3 times. I know Santa Fe Rails, I played it like 6 or 7 times.
I was going to say, I remember you saying, I'm not ready to review this.
Yeah.
And it was after your 4th play.
Right.
And you were like, it's not time yet.
It wasn't. I wanted to do it right and not do it a disservice. But I know, like, Smiley Face, I played it once. And I was like, I don't need to play this game again. Yeah. It's junk, you know?
Sometimes you do know. And I think that's a good thing to point out, right? Is lest our listeners come across believing that, oh, well, the Hidden Gems guys say that you should play a game at least more than once. And I mean, generally, you probably should. But if you hate a game after the first play and it's not because you just did poorly, don't feel obligated to commit to it.
Yeah. Well, I know for Cavum, if I'd only played Cavum once,
yeah,
it wouldn't be on my shelf right now.
Right.
And that would be a dang shame because that game is amazing.
It would be on my shelf.
It would be on your shelf. Which would be even a worse shame.
No, that would be great.
Because the first time I was just like, this game's meh. And then I played it again and again, and I was, oh, wow, this game's pretty excellent.
Right.
But that's why you got to be careful about passing judgment on 1 play.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. All right. Well, we had one other question from the infamous Bill Arney.
The villain Bill.
He asked, what game have you played that you're, quote unquote, pretty to definitely sure has a strategy to win, but you absolutely don't have a handle on it, or feel even if you played it 100 times, you might not ever get it?
I could see why Bill would ask this question. He has a hard time grasping games.
Oh, man.
Just kidding. That's not true.
He's not even here to defend himself.
He's not. Actually, in his defense, the last time we played BasketBoss, he wrecked us.
Both times.
Yeah.
I've played with him.
Yeah. Bill's a good player. For me, I would say the game that I could never figure out was A Few Acres of Snow. I don't know if you guys ever played that one or not.
No.
But basically,
I played it once online. It was pretty opaque. I had a hard time.
It is. And so it's an area control deck builder war game, which sounds awesome, right? All that checks boxes. I'm like, yeah, I want to try that. And for whatever reason, I just could not figure out how to construct my deck in a way to where I could be successful. I played it on Yukata a lot. And I just kept getting killed by everybody. I couldn't figure the sieges out. I couldn't figure out how to take territory. I consider myself to be a pretty good deck builder player, but A Few Acres of Snow, just couldn't figure it out.
It's a tricky one.
Yeah.
I will say, just off the top of my head, one for me, I think would be Splendor. This is not a game that's questionable whether there's actually a definite strategy. There for sure is a definite strategy, but I think I've played Splendor, who knows how many times. I don't know that I've ever won a game of Splendor. And I don't know why that is. It's not that complicated of a game, but for whatever reason, I mean, I can score points, but I don't think I've ever won. It's just tricky.
Yeah.
So, definitely Scythe, but I won't go on a tirade about Scythe.
Again.
I probably just need to actually suck it up and play it again. There was a game, we played it several times a while back, and I can't remember quite the name of it. It's Empires or Age of Empires, or it's this giant box. It takes a super long time to play.
Empire's Age of Discovery.
Yeah.
Glenn Drover, yeah.
That one, I feel like it was, if I didn't finish dead last every time, I was pretty close. And it wasn't like I didn't enjoy the game. It was just, I don't think I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Worker placement with area control.
Yeah.
It's an interesting mechanic for sure, but a little bit odd.
Yep.
Talia, you got an answer for this one? Think of any?
Not really one that I have played a lot that I couldn't get a handle on, but Wingspan, the first time I played that game.
Yeah.
I came in dead last. I had no idea what I was doing, but I haven't played it again.
But it's just birds.
It's just birds. It's
hard
little
could it
tiny
be?
birds. I got to the end and I was, wow, screwed that up.
Yeah, if memory serves me right, and I think with Wingspan this gets a lot of people, is not understanding how those bird cards can fire off of each other in the row for all those bonuses you can get, tucking cards and all that stuff.
You have to be really watchful and line up all of the synergies and everything.
I did not do that.
Yep. Yeah, I remember. That's an easy thing to not
bad.
get the first play.
All right, well, that's a wrap on the mailbag, I think.
Yeah. Keep sending them in, folks. We enjoy answering these mailbag questions, and we need more questions, so feel free to send them in. We'll answer them.
Yep.
Mail time.
We're making that the new intro music.
So we always have a cocktail every episode. What are we drinking tonight, Chris?
Yeah, so tonight we're talking about games by Corné van Moorsel, a designer from the Netherlands. So in honor of Corné and his games, we decided to do the cocktail Dutch 75. You probably have not heard of this particular drink, and that's because this is actually a variation on a more popular drink known as the French 75. Do you guys know this one?
Yeah,
I was going to say,
75.
I was going to ask if that was the same.
No lavender.
Oh.
So a French 75 is very much like a Tom Collins, which I love, but with champagne in it instead of club soda. So the French 75 is gin, simple syrup, lemon juice, and sparkling wine or champagne. So the only difference between the French 75 and the Dutch 75 is that instead of gin, you use vodka.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's it. That's the only variation. Very simple drink, shaken and served that way. Really nice. It's kind of reminiscent of a brunch type drink, a mimosa or something like that.
It's nice and tart.
It's very good.
Yeah.
It's tasty.
It is. It is.
Tasty morsel, you
Tasty
might say.
morsels. So yeah, Corné van Moorsel. Like I said, we're talking about his designs tonight from Quali Games. I had hoped to be able to do a little bit of information on Corné like we do for Reiner Knizia. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of information on Corné and his background online. And that's because he's just a more unknown designer, which is unfortunate because a lot of his
underappreciated,
you might say. And that's unfortunate because a lot of his games are quite good. I had actually reached out to him and we were trying to coordinate doing an interview or getting a little info, but we just couldn't make our schedules work. But looking forward to talking about him and his company and his designs. If you're familiar with any game by Corné van Moorsel, it's probably Factory Fun, or Factory Funner is his newest edition of that design. But he has many published designs, over 20.
Cool.
We're going to talk about 3 of those tonight.
Well, we have an important transition point here. Talia, would you like to do the honors?
Yeah, I forgot what was this. let's
That's it.
let's get to the games.
Let's do it.
World League. A new basketball league has been founded. Each season, the team managers can make their team better by buying good players from the transfer market. Build up the best team. Purchase good new players and get assistance from a trainer, player agent, banker, or even the referee to win the trophies. Are you the best team manager?
I don't know. Are we?
Are you? You can be in this game. BasketBoss. Published in 2009 by Quali Games. At the time of this recording, its BGG ranking is 4,146. As all these games designed by Corné van Moorsel. How did I hear about this game? Because this game is definitely more obscure, so this one is another Tom Vassell recommendation. Tom tends to like Quali Games quite a bit, and I heard about this from him specifically because he loved the theme of this game. Tom is very much into theme in games. It's very important to him, maybe even to a fault sometimes, to be quite honest. But he did love the theme of this one, and it caught my attention, so I picked that one up. So in BasketBoss, what you're doing is you're a basketball team manager, and you are trying to construct successful basketball teams. The game takes place over 6 years or 6 championship seasons, and what you're trying to do in this game is construct the best teams to try to win championships in the 6 seasons to score points. Before I get into the specifics of the rules, I think it's important to understand how the players and the teams work. This is critical to understanding the rules. So you'll draft players through an auction, and every player has values. Each player has a rectangular cardboard token associated with them, and it's got 6 partitions or segments associated with it. And within each segment, it has a differing number of basketballs. The higher the number of basketballs, the more skilled that player is for that particular season. And that's important to understand because in some seasons, they will be weaker than they are in other seasons. So, for example, the rookie has a really weak score in his first couple of seasons, and then he comes on really strong later in his career, while another player who's more of a veteran might be really strong when you draft him, but then he kind of peters off as the game goes on. In addition, when you draft these players, you're going to put them on a player board in 5 different positions, just like you would put them in a basketball team roster. To have the best team possible that scores you the most points, you want to have a diversified team. You want to have 1 center, 1 point guard, 1 power forward, but you can mix it up. You could have 2 centers on your team. You could have 5 centers on your team if you wanted, but if you do that, the strength of your team will decrease. For every ununique position that you have, your team strength gets bumped down a notch, basically. So that's real important to understand if you want to understand how to play the game. So the way it works is, at the beginning of the season, we'll draft players. This is a standard English-style auction. Bid will go around and around. High bidder wins, pays his bid. Everybody else take their bids back, and you take that player and you put them on your board. After that draft, the season champion is decided. Like I said, this will happen through 6 seasons. So we'll determine a winner. Once the points are awarded, you'll earn income. So one thing I didn't mention is that some of the players will generate money for you to use in the future year's auctions for additional players to draft. But generally speaking, the stronger the player, the less money they generate for your team for future auctions. Thematically, that's supposed to represent you're paying them more.
Okay. Yeah, some of them bring in 0, which actually subtracts from your income.
Right. You would get no money.
But it's expensive to have good players on your team.
Having a championship, Steph Curry ain't cheap.
Right.
So you got to pay for those players. After you earn income, you have a thing called the season bar that will shift down, and basically that covers up all prior seasons so that everybody can see what the new values for the players are for that season. You'll update your team strength, you'll refill the market, and then the last thing you'll do before drafting your team again is you will hire specialists. And specialists will give you all certain types of benefits and perks. One, for example, is the agent, the Jerry Maguire. And basically what he lets you do is he will let you match a bid. So instead of having to exceed a bid, say Cameron bids $3,000, I can match him at $3,000 and be beating him instead of having to exceed to $4,000 or higher. Then if you win with the agent, you actually pay $1,000 less than what you actually bid. So he saves you money. Pretty useful. And that's basically the structure of a round. We'll do that 6 times. We'll award championships at the end of each year, and whoever has the most points at the end of the game wins. Oh, and one more thing I'll add, and this is important. In addition to your championship points, the strength of your team in the final season is added to that championship score, and then whoever has the highest total score wins the game. That's generally how you play basketball. So I left out a few things, but that gives you a general idea. Before we get into the thoughts in this review, we do want to point out that this is the one game that Talia did not get to play. So in case you're wondering, why isn't Talia saying anything? It's because she didn't actually play this one. She did play the other 2, so we'll get her thoughts on that one. I wanted everybody to know we're not ignoring her thoughts, which we value highly.
But of course, if you just want to comment on something, you're welcome to.
Just for fun.
Yes, color commentary is welcome.
Color commentary, and
Make
sometimes it's the most fun.
Yeah.
So if you've been listening, we've been really hot on theme lately. So in our last review, when we were talking about mining games and Cavum, we were talking a lot about theme, and I think this game is no exception. I think this game has a very interesting theme. I can see why Tom was attracted to it, and that you're running a basketball team. I don't know any other game that does this, where you're actually like
it's unique for sure.
Yeah, you're like a general manager, and you're creating a roster. So how well did you think that Corné did in implementing that theme into the mechanics of this game?
Yeah, it was honestly the very first thing I thought of when I sat down to collect my thoughts about BasketBoss. And I thought, theme was very tightly connected, right? Every mechanic seemed to very neatly fit into drafting. even the slider mechanic, the way that it represents the player's career over time, I think is just awesome, because you can think, okay, the next round, this player is going to have a 5 instead of a 4 because he's progressing and getting better. And later, by the 5th round, he's going to be dropped back down, so I may have to think about swapping him out. And just like you would think about a player who's sustaining injuries or anything like that, or just getting a little creaky in the knees after playing, basketball for so long. I thought stuff like that was pretty cool.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I would agree for sure. There's just a lot of little theme tie-ins that I really enjoyed. Like even the ref. Right. Taking on the ref, you get an immediate bump to your team strength, and then you can take bribes, basically, to determine who wins in a tie. So, yeah, there's just a lot of little things that fit the needs of the game from a mechanical standpoint, but also tie into the theme really well. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I found a lot of the specialists to be really hilarious. There's a specialist, they call him the quote-unquote trainer. This is Bobby Knight, okay?
Looks exactly like it.
It's clearly inspired by like Indiana Hoosiers Bobby Knight. And when you take him, he whips your players into shape, basically. Yeah. Your players theoretically get better. You can bump their stats up to the next season, which you'll often do to benefit yourself. You're making them better. I really enjoyed that. Another thing I thought was just really humorous was I felt like every player placard had a story.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You've got the rookie, you've got the veteran, you've got like the guy that starts strong, then he peters off, then he comes back. Maybe he had an injury or something. I just found that as we were playing, we were coming up with all these explanations for why these guys had these stats that they did, which was fun.
The player names are great, or terrible, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah. So you mentioned Barry Lurd, which is clearly Larry Bird.
Yeah.
It looks Larry Bird. I mean, there's
Bill Bull.
Kobe Brilliant.
Yeah.
Just these really ridiculous names.
Very punny and...
Yeah. So, as we mentioned in the rules, this game has a standard English-style auction. And we've talked about English-style auctions before in the podcast, specifically when we reviewed Palazzo way back in episode 3. And I don't think any of us were very kind to that particular review because an English-style auction can be kind of boring. Mm-hmm. And this one utilizes that as well. So how did you feel that mechanism played out in this game as compared to like Palazzo or other games that use it?
Yeah, I would say, directly compared to Palazzo, that game had that weird mechanic where you had multiple types of currency and things going on too, which diluted the mechanic a little bit. But in this one, it didn't bother me as much. And I think maybe, this is just a theory, but maybe the reason for that is that money is extremely tight.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas an English auction can just drag on forever and ever because it keeps escalating and escalating and escalating. In this one, every raise is a critical decision.
Every one increment.
Yeah.
Because you only have maybe $10 or less, right, that you have to bid with. Or I guess it's $10 million or whatever.
Basco,
whatever the currency is called. Yeah.
Honestly, I kind of forgot halfway through the game that we were doing an auction. It almost feels like, what am I willing to purchase? Rather than feeling like you're sitting there in a suit raising a little flag with your number on it, which is what the images that are invoked for me for an English-style auction.
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys said. And I think for me, too, the thing that really saves this game from being just a meh game like Palazzo is the planning involved in selecting your players is really just fantastic, honestly, because everything is open, right? I can look at Cameron's board, I can look at Jason's board, and I can see what their current team strengths are, what their current team strengths will be in future seasons, and prepare for that. So not only am I thinking about, okay, can I score points now, but maybe I take this player who doesn't do anything for me this season, but in next season or even the season after that, he might be the key to me winning that season and winning that championship for all those points. That is just such a brilliant mechanism of figuring that plan out. Not to mention, when you add in the trainer who lets you bump people up, then you've got just another level of thought going on. Well, this guy doesn't appear like he helps me, but if I take him and get the trainer and bump him up, now he helps me significantly. Well, just really good.
Or even down to if Chris has the trainer right now, he's thinking about the next level down because that's what he's going to get. If he takes that guy, he's probably going to be willing to outbid me.
Right.
Type of a thing. So if I'm the person setting the price and I know that you're going to go for it because you really want it and it's going to be worth it to you, I'm going to make you pay for it. I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to give it to you for the price that I get it for.
Or even if you've got the money, you just don't allow it.
Yeah.
Right. I know in the last game we played where Bill beat me, the reason he beat me is he was
so
pretty
rich.
Flush with money at the end, and he didn't necessarily need those players, but he bought them just so I couldn't have them because he saw that I could bump them up and get a really strong team the last season. He just didn't allow it.
Yeah.
Which was good play.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say this auction also has a bit of a Strasbourg feel to it in a way, in that.
Ooh.
Yeah, we all know.
That's my line.
We all know Chris's love. Yeah, because you can see all the players for a given season that are going to be drafted. Right. So not only are you thinking about the current auction, but you're thinking 4 auctions ahead. So I'm looking at the 5th or 6th player in that line thinking, okay, well, of these, I'm only going to be able to afford to grab 1, maybe 2 of these players. So there's also that dynamic of thinking, okay, well, I know Chris really wants that one, so maybe I should go grab this one over here, which is maybe a little bit less good for me, but I can probably get it for a cheaper price.
Yep.
And all of that going on, which adds to that forgetting that you're just doing a boring auction.
Yep. One more thing I want to mention before we transition over to cons, and I love it when this happens in games. It's one of my favorite things, is when people comment that certain things are overpowered or seem like they're too strong, and then in another play with different people, they comment just the opposite. And that happens so many times in this game.
Really?
Like, we had games where people were like, the agent is too strong, agent is overpowered, it's all that matters. And then I played in 2 other games of this where the people that won never took the agent one time. I had people say, well, if you jump out early and you get a bunch of championships early, it's an insurmountable lead. And then the very next game I played, the person that won didn't win any of the first 3 season championships and finished strong at the end, and they ended up winning the game. All right. So I think that's a good sign. It gives the appearance that certain strategies are overpowered or too strong, but in actuality, at least in my plays, I saw it won with many different strategies in many different ways that many people said was an unwinnable way, and it was still viable. So what do you guys not like about the game?
Yeah, I think that depending on the situation, some of the special, what are they called? The specialists can be more helpful than others. I don't think any of them are overpowered, but I think that some of them perhaps are less useful at times. And it all depends on what you're going for strategically, right? But I did find that I'm not going to say the agent is overpowered or that it's critical to win, because it's not. I was in one of those games where I didn't have it the entire game. I don't think I won, but I was competitive. But it seems if you're not able to get a hold of the agents that correspond with whatever strategy you're going with, that can be pretty detrimental.
Yeah. I think one thing that I noticed, and we've definitely harped on this in other games in the past, but I feel like it must be mentioned here, is the art in this game is pretty terrible.
Yeah.
It's just not good at all. You know what it reminds me of? Is I don't know if you guys have ever been to middle school like art fair, a 6th grade art fair where you can tell it looks like they're making a good attempt, but their technique is just not quite there yet. That's what it reminds me of.
Yeah.
It just, if you look at the faces too closely, you're like, man, this art is just really bad. It's not a pretty game at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, we talked about it with Shanghai, but there's also some pretty stereotypical tropes going on within the art as well.
For sure, culturally, and there's one female basketball player in the whole game, Laura Jackson. She has the worst stats of anybody in the game, and I'm like, come on, man.
Talia, your thoughts?
I take offense to that.
What do you think about that?
I mean, in fairness, I think it is obviously, it's a difficult thing to try to do, right? Basketball is about people, and you're trying to depict people that are from all over the world, from different, backgrounds and stuff like that, but you're also drawing cartoons. It's a fine line to sort of navigate. So, I mean, I kind of want to give him credit for putting the effort forward to make it a worldwide representation in the game, but it's hard to pull off, and that there may be some shortcomings in that regard.
For sure. And just to be clear, I don't think that this was any way insensitive or malicious from him, because I have interacted with him briefly on email, and I've backed some of his Kickstarters, so I've gotten communication from him, and he seems like a super nice guy. I just think that people should understand that when this game was made in 2009, we weren't really thinking about things the way that we are now, and you might have to extend a little bit of grace towards them in that way, because some of them are a little bit on the nose, for sure.
Sure. Should we move on to final thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'm ready.
Let's do it.
So before we go into our final thoughts, I think it would be a good idea just to review our rating scale. We do this every 3 to 4 episodes or so. So in Hidden Gems, we rate on a 1 to 6 scale, with 1 being the lowest and 6 being the highest. If we give a game a 1, that means that we don't like the game because we think it's broken in some way. There's some sort of mechanism or some sort of game design choice which makes the game, in our opinion, unplayable. 2, there's nothing wrong with the game from a mechanic standpoint. We just feel like it's a bad game. We don't enjoy this game at all. We don't want to play it again. A 3 for us is what we call a meh game. It's not necessarily bad, but it doesn't excite us. It doesn't do a lot for us. We don't really care to play this game either. It's just meh. A 4 game, now this is where we're starting to get into better games. This is a good game for us. We enjoyed it. We would play it again.
You would keep it.
I would keep it.
That's the threshold for
That's
Chris.
the threshold for me. A 5 is an excellent game. We think this game is above average. We would definitely want to play this game again if it hit the table. And then 6 for us is top of the top. Our favorite games, something at least...
flawless gem.
A flawless gem. Something for me I would probably consider in my top 50 because I'm very generous about handing out 6s. But it's when you've played hundreds and hundreds of games, it's one of your favorite games. Okay? All right. So, with that being said, Cameron, why don't you get us started?
Yeah. So, overall, I enjoyed BasketBoss. I felt like the pace and the complexity of this game were really manageable. The tough decisions in this game kind of all center around how you manage your money, knowing what a player is worth or how to make them worth more at the right time, choosing the right specialist, knowing when it's worth it to take a certain specialist away from someone else. There's good decisions. I could use an art update for sure, but I enjoyed this game. I would happily play it again. So I'm going to go with a 4.
All right.
Cameron, you always have such refined sounding final thoughts. Mine are always all over the place.
Yeah, I
but
just shoot from the hip.
But I ended up giving this game a 4 as well. I really did enjoy playing it. I think that ultimately there was something about it that makes me not quite as passionate to go out and evangelize this game to other people. I don't know exactly what that is, but I think it's a solid game. I would enjoy playing it, and I think it's a game that people should definitely check out. The theme is spot on. It's very well integrated. I think there's tense decisions, multiple paths to victory.
Yeah.
Chris, there you go. So yeah, I think it's a solid game. I think there's just something intangible that held it back from being a 5 or a 6 for me, but it's definitely solid in my book.
Nice. So as we mentioned in review, we've not been kind to English auctions in the past. By today's standards, they can definitely feel a bit stale. But I will say I think that this game is an English auction done right.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that while the bidding is not that exciting, what I'm bidding for is very exciting. And I really enjoyed that puzzle of trying to figure out, is it worth it for me to get this guy now and try to get a good placement in this season, or am I thinking farther down the road? In some cases, 3 or 4 seasons down the road, right? Trying to set up a big score. That level of planning is what I'm looking for in games. And then when you take that and add to it the specialist who can give you just that slightest bit of an edge to get ahead in certain seasons, really just push this game from a good game to an excellent game for me.
Wow.
I really like this game. I gave it a 5. I tend to like auctions anyways, and I think that this one did a really good job of that English style auction. So 5 for me.
Very cool. Where can we or our followers find BasketBoss if they're looking for it?
Yeah, at the time of this recording, there are only 7 copies on BGG, so this game is a little bit more of a rare find. However, do have a little bit of news here about Quali and Corné van Moorsel games. So Quali just made a deal with BoardGameTables.com to start publishing their games, which is a pretty big deal. So if you don't know, BoardGameTables.com doesn't just do board game tables, they actually do games. Probably their more well-known releases would be On Tour or the incredibly average QE, which is a good production. I just don't care for the game. So they have made an agreement to where they're going to start redoing a lot of Corné's games. And the games that they've announced are Factory Funner, Habitats, Roll to the Top, Power Ships, and BasketBoss.
Oh, cool.
With an art upgrade. So
Nice.
Whew, thank goodness. So they said they're going to upgrade the art and they're going to make minor changes to the rule sets in some of the games. So the games will be pretty much the same, just with a nice coat of paint on them.
Do not mess this game up.
Don't mess it up. It's good as is.
The rules are fun.
Yeah, if you can't get it now, just wait a little bit and you'll be able to get a much more visually appealing copy in the future.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, that's a wrap on BasketBoss.
You are a caravan leader, trying to be the Gipsy King by placing the caravan in the free lands near the wonderful lakes. After all the lands are filled with caravans, players will score points. Points are scored for controlling lakes with gold coins and connected caravan groups. After the first round of filling the map, a second round is executed, with some minor changes. The player with the most points after these 2 rounds is the winner and is crowned as the Gipsy King. Can you be that player?
Again, I don't know. Can you? All right, Gipsy King. Published in 2007, again by Koala Games, designed by Corné van Moorsel. Currently ranked on BGG 3,665. Cameron, you explained a little bit of the high-level rules during your flavor text description, but this is a bit of an oddball game. I feel like I always get stuck with explaining these weirder games. I will do my best here. This is actually a pretty simple game when you boil it all down. Essentially, players are placing wooden caravans out onto a semi-randomly generated array of hexes. There are land hexes and there are lake hexes. So you're placing your caravans onto the land hexes around these various lakes that get formed by this randomly generated board. The goal in placing caravans is to score points in one of 2 ways. You can score either by creating a large group of caravans that are all connected to one another, and the larger the group, the more points you'll score. But you can also score points by having a majority of caravans surrounding certain lakes. Not all the lakes are valuable, but certain lakes will have value depending on the number of fish. The big mechanism of this game, though, really comes down to turn order. So turn order is randomly decided at the beginning of the game, and each player gives one of their caravans to create a queue of caravans that represent the turn order. And whoever is at the front of that queue takes their turn, and they have the option of either placing a caravan or passing. If they place a caravan, their caravan will move to the back of the queue, and then the new person at the front of the queue will then have the opportunity to either place a caravan or pass. If a player chooses to pass, however, they're basically removing themselves from that turn order queue until the placement phase moves on to the next lake. And so let me explain what I mean by that. So each of the lake hexes has a number on it between 1 and 15. At the beginning of the game, if a player chooses to place a caravan, they can only place on available land hexes that touch the number 1 lake. Once that lake is completely full of players' caravans, then we move on to the number 2 lake, and then the number 3 lake, and so on and so forth. When a player chooses to pass, they are passing for the current lake number. And once the next lake becomes available because the previous one has filled up, that player will then be at the front of the queue for the placement on that next lake. You're basically reserving and saying, I don't want to place any more on the current lake. I want to make sure that I get the first placement on the next one. That's basically how the game works. You continue until all of the land hexes are filled with caravans. Then there's a scoring phase. Again, that's both with the majorities around the lake and with the groups of caravans that you've created. Then the whole board gets wiped, and we do the entire thing again, this time starting with the number 15 and going back down to 1.
Yeah.
With the one important difference in the second phase, which is that 2 times during this phase, you have the option when placing a caravan to place 2 of your caravans onto the same hex, which can be big because that influences both majorities around the lakes as well as the size of your group. Once that second phase has happened, we've gone from 15 all the way back to 1, there's another scoring phase at the very end, and then whoever has the most points wins. So this is a bit of an odd game because it focuses so heavily on turn order. I wanted to throw that out there. Have you guys ever played another game that relies on turn order in the same way that this game does? And what did you think of that being one of the main mechanisms?
I've never played a game that relies heavily on turn order like that, and it kind of threw me. So that was one of my cons because I'm not used to doing it. And I have a hard time with looking ahead. That's a struggle for me in general in most games. I have a hard time planning ahead.
Yeah, you have to be constantly looking out 2 or 3 numbers ahead to see, okay, well, do I really care about this one placement that's obvious, or do I want to wait for something that's so much further away?
That was really hard for me. Like, I watched Chris do it on that one play, and I was like, he keeps passing. What is he going to do? How are you going to get points? And then he ended up getting a crap ton of points and then winning. I'm like, what just happened?
Yeah.
I had a hard time with that.
It can feel painful because it is such a central decision in this game, because when you play, you're bumping yourself to the back of the line, and depending on how close the current lake is to being filled up, you could set yourself to being playing dead last on the very next lake. And if that's important to you, then you got to pass early.
Yep.
And for sure that if other people are playing ahead of you, they're going to do everything they can to take the hexes around that lake that you really need, right?
Yep.
We play games all the time where turn order is important, right? Where you want to try to jockey for a good position to get what you need. But I've never played a game where that's essentially the game.
The game.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
I mean, this
managing which order you're going to play in.
Gipsy King is turn order the game.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what it is, right? It's how you're managing your position in the turn order to ensure, and that's what's clever about it, is if you begin passing early enough, you can guarantee that you get the place in a certain hex that's important to you. But the trade-off is the earlier you begin passing, the more opportunity and points you're giving to your opponents because they're just laying caravans down and you're not.
Yep.
But it might pay off if you land a couple of those hexes that are just critical to getting majorities and getting a large connected caravan. It's really interesting in that way.
And if you're playing with people that are thinking ahead multiple rounds in advance, you can experience what I did, which was constantly being the second to last person to place. Because we didn't mention it in the rules overview, but if everybody passes out and there are multiple spots left around the current lake that you're on, the last person can just fill in all of them.
Yep.
And if someone gets 3 in a row because everyone else ducked out because they're worried about the next round, they're just inviting the fourth person to have a 3 or 4 whatever long caravan all to themselves.
Yep.
So you could potentially be just handing points to people.
Yeah.
I had another thing I was thinking about with this game, because I frequently found myself playing defense and sort of being the person that had to keep the other person from getting all those points. And it was, you're going to make me do. I didn't want to place
you weren't
in this
very happy
location.
about it
I was going to pass. But if I do, I'm just handing points and everyone else at the table is going to be mad at me. What do you think about that?
I don't play defense well at all, usually. Not in any game. I don't like to do it because I got to focus on one thing.
I've got to worry about my own stuff.
I got to worry about my own thing. I got to make my own points. So I have a hard time playing defense because I'm like, what if I don't get this point? I'm going to come in dead last, which I did.
Yeah, I don't think I've played many games where I've felt that tension between having to play offense and defense equally well in a game than this one. I mean, that's definitely present in a lot of games that you play. You have to not set other people up for things and make sure that if there's a great opportunity for them, maybe you snipe the card that they need or something. But in this game, I feel like you have to be constantly weighing that decision of, is it better for me to take the spot that helps me or to take the spot that hurts my opponent? Because I'm not going to get another chance to take that spot before they get the opportunity to grab it, right? And I thought that was a really interesting push-pull.
Yeah, I agree. I really enjoyed the offensive, defensive decisions in this game. And another thing that I really liked, which I think was happening to Cameron quite a bit, which I was getting quite a kick out of, is...
That was griping the whole time.
You really were. It was so great.
Because of the way that turn order works... If everybody passes but 2 people, that person that's left is forced to play in a blocking fashion. So what I mean is, let's say that Jason, Cameron, and I are left, and I pass, and then it's just Cameron and Jason left. Well, if Cameron were to pass, he knows that he's leaving Jason with a big point-scoring opportunity, which he can't do, right? But I've forced Cameron... to be the one to step in and stop Jason instead of me because I passed.
Which means that once I've stopped Jason by placing...
You've moved to the back of the line.
I moved to the back of the line, which puts me at a disadvantage.
It's so great.
And I'll be honest, we had a couple of tense moments because Chris did that to me, and I was like, pass. And he was like, what?
Just out of spite.
You're going to let Jason... And I'm like, hey, dude, you're going to have to...
You did it to me.
You got to play this game, too.
It's true.
I'm going to do what I want this time.
It can bite you in the butt. But you
don't own me.
Yeah, that's right. You're not going to play my turn for me.
As much as I complain about catch-up mechanisms in game, this is actually a good one if you play it right. And what I mean by that is, if I'm in the back and Jason and Cameron are kind of jockeying for first place and I'm a little bit farther behind, I can pass much more easily because Cameron has more to lose than I do, right? I'm already losing. I need to make moves that benefit me so I can catch up. But Cameron is more invested in denying Jason at that point. Yep. So if you can see those opportunities and be like, pass, you deal with it. I'm not going to waste my turn on that. Yeah. And it's a clever way of allowing yourself to get back in the game by forcing people who have more investment in stopping somebody.
The one other thing that I will mention, and I will say I'm not huge on expansions to games, just generally. I feel like when I first started getting into the hobby, I was like, oh man, I love this game. I want to go out and get every expansion for it possible. And there are good expansions out there for sure. But I think I've generally cooled on the idea of expansions over time, the more I've been in the hobby, because usually games are good on their own. All that said, when I was browsing BGG, I found that there was a mini expansion for this game, and it's not easy to find, but it's such a small expansion that I was like, I can find a couple wood pieces to work for this, and that's bridges. It adds one tiny mechanism that every player gets a small wooden bridge piece that they can use one time in the first phase of the game and the second phase of the game to connect two of their groups together across a lake hex. And we played that a couple times just to kind of see what effect it had on the game. I was curious what you guys thought about that.
Yeah, I like this expansion a lot, and I think this is expansions done right. Not adding a ton of bloat and a ton of unnecessary extra rules and a ton of stuff. It's literally one piece, one extra rule that you can teach in 20 seconds. But yet it added another unique and interesting dimension to the game that you had to consider. You couldn't ignore it.
Right.
If you ignored it, you wouldn't have a chance. Yet so easy to incorporate. Love expansions like that. I think that it made the game even better.
Yeah, I think it was really well done as well. With the whole concept of turn order being the main focus of this game, there's three big decisions. It's turn order, where you're going to place your doubles, and where you're going to put your bridge. And is it too early to put your bridge down, right? It may not always be too early.
True.
As Chris found out.
Found out. I lost because I couldn't even get mine down in a meaningful way because I waited too long.
Right.
So yeah, it definitely matters.
Cool. What did you guys not like about this game?
When you first pulled it out, I was like, for the love. Looks very boring.
Oh, yeah.
It's not the most exciting looking game on the table.
That was my first thought when you pulled it out.
It has lots of colors.
It has lots of colors. It just doesn't look very exciting.
Yeah, and I will comment, too, on the look of the game. It is so basic. I mean, even the caravans are basically
no one can see your air quotes.
Rectangular blocks with something that maybe loosely resembles wheels. Okay? It's as bare bones as it gets. The art is pretty uninspired, but there's not a lot to art here. It's a simple game, and I don't think we've made it clear here. This game is a filler game. Just understand that. Part of the reason why this game
runtime is what, 25, 30 minutes?
15 or 20 in some cases.
Sure.
Yep.
So the reason it looks as simple as it does is because it's a filler and there's not a lot to it. It's a very simple game.
It's essentially an abstract game, right?
I was thinking that,
an abstract filler. Yep. But it could look better.
Cool. Well, should we move on to final thoughts?
Yeah, let's do it.
So.
Talia, you're in the seat of honor.
It's
time.
You've heard us do it. You heard us doing BasketBoss. You're up.
I'm not up.
We're ready for your well-crafted
It's not well
summary.
crafted. I don't take notes. You see, this is not what I do. I think I would give this a 4. I like it. I'm intrigued to play it again. Honestly, hearing the rules again, it's been a while since I've played it, kind of makes me want to play it again, just so I can see if I can get the turn order thing down, and it might bump it up to a 5 if I played it a little bit more. Definitely intrigued by it. Wouldn't hate it if it got pulled out on the table. I'd definitely play it again.
Nice.
I like it.
Okay.
Well
Favorable review.
Yeah, for me, this game is amazingly simple. And the first time I read the rules, which it's the front and back of a sheet of paper, when I read it, I was like, this is a weird game and it's probably going to be a dud. And then I played it a couple times. And to be honest, the first time I played it, I was still pretty unsure. I was like, this is weird. I feel like I'm just randomly placing things out. But I think, Chris, you mentioned this on the last episode with one of the games that we reviewed with Cavum, actually, that the more you played it, the more the strategy became apparent and the more it evolved. And I feel like this game did something similar. They're vastly different games, right? And vastly different complexity levels. But I felt like the more
opposite ends of the spectrum.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But I felt like the more I played this game, the more light bulbs were going off. I really enjoyed that. I loved the offense versus defense, the tension between going for the large groups versus going after the fish. It's quick to teach. It's easy to play. I really enjoyed this one. I gave it a 5. For its length and for what it is a filler game, but you can teach it in 2 seconds, and I feel like there's a lot to it for what it is. I enjoyed it.
Sweet. I also really like this game. I can see why Jason would want to play it like 500 times on his phone, because it's a really good game. It's simple, it's easy to learn, but it's hard to win, which I think is marks of a really good game. I really like the variant rule with the bridges. I felt like that added another interesting decision to force you to maximize your efforts and minimize chances for your opponents to capitalize on that. This is another one where everyone at the table gets quiet, and I love that. because it's so simple, but the decisions are so tough. So I also am going to give Gipsy King a 5.
Nice. Yeah, so for me, one of the things that I really enjoy about this podcast is it does help me establish in my mind how I really do feel about a game through the writing downs of pros and cons. All right, I think it's just a good way to do things. You know, when people talk about life decisions, they're like, you should write down pros and cons. I'm like, that sounds like a waste of time. But,
But for board games, it's so much more.
for sure. It really helps.
Who cares about
I was
life?
like, wow, this really does help. Because when I sat down, Gipsy King is just such a deceptively simple game. Initially, I was like, I think I might land on a 4 and this one is good. And then I sat down and started trying to think of cons. And I couldn't write anything. I was like, it doesn't look great. That's the only thing that I could come up with. And I started to think about the game more. And I was like, man, the game is fun. And I had a fun time playing it. I think I was maybe internally biasing myself to think, there's just not much to this. I shouldn't give it a 5. But it is a 5. This game is a 5. It's an excellent game. I like fillers anyways. I tend to review them a little bit more favorably on this show, but this one just does it really well for all the reasons that the guys have laid out already in their summaries that I won't hash back through, and you as well, babe.
And Talia.
Yeah,
And
guys.
I'm just used to saying that, okay? Awesome decisions, turn order decisions, putting people in tough situations that they don't want to be in. I love stuff like that. Excellent game.
Awesome.
Sweet. Where can we get Gipsy King, Jason?
So I found this game sort of on a lark. I was browsing through trying to come up with a list of games to pull for the podcast, and this wasn't even on our podcast list yet. But as I was scrolling through BGG Marketplace, I just happened upon it, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'll just tack it onto my order. Turned out to be really good. But there are copies of it out there. There are 20 copies on BGG right now, so it is available. Another thing I will mention is there is an app. The app somehow looks worse than the actual board game, so don't be expecting greatness out of the look and feel of the app. It functions perfectly fine, but I have found myself playing it on my phone a lot recently, so if you can't find a physical copy of it, feel free to check it out and get a feel for the gameplay online.
So that's how you've gotten so good at it.
I know. I honestly, after I found out that he's been playing the game on his phone, I was like, all right, I feel much better about how I did tonight. This is my second time playing this game, and Jason's got like 400 plays in.
Jason's been practicing in the bathroom on the toilet for the last month. Prepping for this moment to crush us all in Gipsy King. All right, well, those are our thoughts on Gipsy King.
Zebras need grassland, chimps need forest, crocs water, ants dry land, and hogs need something of everything. Your task as a park manager is to provide the habitats for the animals in your African wildlife park, to build watchtowers and access roads to meet your tourists' special demands. Combine everything the best.
Habitats.
Can you combine everything the best?
Yeah,
We have to end on a
Habitats, published in 2016 by Quali Games. At the time of this recording, its BGG ranking is 1,431, pretty highly ranked. I heard about this game also from Tom Vassell. As I mentioned, he likes Quali Games quite a bit, and he was pretty hot on this game. And when I acquired it, it came available on Kickstarter, and I just couldn't resist because at that time, the player pieces were these cute little porcelain figurines that we'll talk about a little bit later that just sucked me in, so I had to get it. All right, brief rules summary on Habitats. The idea of Habitats is you are running a zoo, and you are trying to construct the best zoo where your animals will be the happiest. You'll be adding animals to that zoo and trying to make them happy by surrounding them with their desired habitat. So before I get into the rules, the way that works is each animal has a list of terrain types that it wants to be next to. Okay, so it's important to note also that the animal itself is printed on a terrain type, but that doesn't satisfy it. Okay, it's only things that it is adjacent to. For example, I might have a mongoose who wants to be next to a grass and a rock. I can put a grass tile next to that mongoose, orthogonally adjacent, not diagonally, sharing a side, and then another tile that has rocks on it and that will satisfy that mongoose, and that mongoose will now score points for me at the end of the game. That's the most simple example. Now let's say that that animal wanted 1 grass and 3 rocks next to it. Now it gets a little bit harder, right? Because you've got to get that animal adjacent to a grass on one edge and then on the other 3 edges next to rocks. However, you can satisfy this in another way, and this is where the game gets really interesting. If those rocks are connected to each other, but are not necessarily connected to the mongoose, that still satisfies that animal. Mm-hmm. So you can make these chains of terrains as long as it's the same type of terrain and they're all touching. As long as that chain of terrain tiles is touching that animal, that satisfies that animal's requirements. So once you understand that, the way the game plays is very simple. In addition to your own player board or your zoo, there's an array of tiles. So this is where you're gaining your tiles to add to your zoo. So on your turn, what you're going to do is you're going to move your player piece, which as I mentioned in my version of the game is a little ceramic animal. And these animals have a facing. They're either facing straight forward, or they can turn to the right, or they can turn to the left. So when it's my turn to take a tile, I can either take the tile that's directly in front of my animal, to the right of my animal, or to the left of my animal, but not the tile behind me. So if I take the tile in front of me, I pick up that tile, I add it to my zoo, and then I move my animal forward into the space that that tile was in, and then I replace the space where I was standing with a new tile. And the board will be constantly in flux that way. What's interesting is all of the players are moving about within this grid of tiles. In addition to the animal types, there are a few other types of tiles present in the game to give you a little bit more choice and things to think about. For example, one type would be observation decks. You can add those to your park, and every completed animal that's adjacent to that observation deck will get you a point. So it's just other ways to score points other than just satisfying your animals. And then lastly, at the end of each year, so there are 3 years or 3 rounds in this game where we'll place a certain number of tiles. At the end of each year, there is an objective. For example, it might be have the most different kinds of terrain types in your park at the end of this year. And then that will score based on first, second, and third place. So in addition to scoring based on the animals in your park, that gives you just one more thing to think about from an end-of-round scoring standpoint.
And those are randomly decided each game.
Yes, randomly decided, and there's many more than 3. I think there are like 9 or 12 of them. So every game will be a little bit different based upon which objectives come out for that certain game. All right, so that's generally how you play Habitats. So you've probably noticed that we've been a little bit harsh on quality games so far from a production standpoint. Mm-hmm. These games from an art standpoint and just from a graphic design standpoint aren't, exciting. But Habitats, I think, is a little bit different from these other 2 games that we reviewed. Has, as I mentioned, these ceramic animals that you can use as player pieces. How did you feel about the production in this one? Did you feel like it was a good leap forward or a small leap forward? Not much difference? What did you think?
I would say for me, I thought it was a leap forward for sure. I don't know that I would consider Habitats to be one of the best designed games out there, right? The ceramic animals reminded me a little bit of Wildlife Safari, the little plastic animals that go with that game, which didn't raise it to greatness in my book. And I think this is kind of the same. I think that of the 3 games we've reviewed, it's by far the best, right? I wasn't blown away by the art, but it didn't stand out to me as a negative, whereas it did in some of the other productions.
In the other 2, yeah.
I honestly was shocked that they were all done by the same designer. So I haven't played as many games as y'all have, but I think Habitats looks very different from the other 2 games, just seeing them here on the table. And I really like the little ceramic animals, except for the rabbit.
What's wrong with the rabbit?
I love the rabbit. I choose it to play with it, but it drives me crazy because you can't tell which way it's facing.
It's at a 45-degree angle.
That was the con I wrote down, but it's so cute. I have to pick it.
I do like the ceramics too, but the rabbit, its butt is facing in a weird direction. So constantly when we were playing this game with Bill and Sarah, we were like, which way is this rabbit facing? And we were like moving it, and Sarah was like, no, it was facing this way. And I was getting confused.
Yeah, it actually,
by this rabbit.
Yeah, it caused problems.
It did cause some problems.
Yeah, my thoughts on the art are similar. Generally, the drawings of the animals are nice.
Yeah.
And it's certainly a step up from some of the other games that we looked at today.
Yeah, I will too. I mean, I agree with Jason. I'm not saying this is the greatest looking game ever, but one more thing I will say about the animals. The drawings are fine. They're not knocking my socks off, but They're varied. I kind of had fun just looking at different kind of animals. There are a lot of animals I'm like, I've never even heard of this animal before. It's not old McDonald animals here. It's pretty, it's pretty exotic type animals. It's cool. I think it was a good attempt there for sure. How else did y'all feel about the gameplay, the tile lane? What else did you guys like?
I think the planning element of this game is really interesting. It's a weird blend. There is a lot of planning that you can do, but you also have to be pretty tactical because all of those animals are moving around that little tableau of tiles constantly. And so you might have a plan of, well, I'm going to go here and I'm going to get this tile, and I'm going to go here and I'm going to get this tile, and it's going to be perfect. And then somebody else steps on that tile and takes it from you, and you're like, well, crap, now what do I do? There is that planning where you're looking ahead and trying to figure out, okay, what's the best path forward? But you always have to be flexible enough to be like, okay, well, if that tile gets taken, then my backup plan is to go this direction and get this other tile. I enjoyed that.
Nice.
That was one of the things I liked about it too. And I think a lot of games, if your backup plan doesn't work out, there's sometimes not anything else you can do. So I feel like, okay, he takes that tile. I have at least 3 other tiles that I could work in.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that makes me feel better because sometimes I have a hard time looking ahead. Really enjoyed that.
You might have to navigate your way around to them, and it might take a little longer, but you can still get them.
Right. And I'm kind of playing on my own board. I don't really love the defense part of games, so I can kind of focus on my own. I'm sure there is a way that you can look at other people's board, and I'm sure you all were doing it. But it didn't affect me any.
Maybe, maybe not. Yeah, it's interesting. You're kind of hinting on something I'm going to talk about a little later. But yes, I think it's a good point. Yeah.
I appreciated the fact that there's so many different opportunities to synergize your objectives. You're constantly trying, to solve the individual animal cards that you've picked up with the next one that you pick up. But you're also trying to make sure that the new ones help with your station cards, right? Because some of them, it's getting certain types of animals in a row or on an angle or whatever. And then you're also trying to figure out, okay, how can I meet the end of round objective at the same time? So you're working on multiple fronts. And I enjoyed doing that.
Yeah, for sure. I got that feeling as well. And just combining everything you have already said, it kind of felt like I was playing 2 games at one time. Which I liked. I had the game of my tableau and my zoo, trying to figure out how I'm going to work all of these animals into here to satisfy them, which is a challenge. I explained this in the rules, but I'm going to reiterate it just to make sure it's clear. Whenever you take a tile for a terrain type to satisfy an animal, that tile also has an animal on it.
Right.
That also wants to be happy, right? So every time you're adding a tile to your zoo to make an animal happy, you're now adding another animal that wants to be happy, right? And you want to try to minimize your unhappy animals. And when you can find those opportunities to put one in there that satisfies one that's in your zoo and he's immediately satisfied based on where you place him, that's fun, right?
Feels good.
It feels good. It's a good puzzle.
Do you think it's probably time to move on to cons then?
Yeah, let's do it.
Sure. Talia, was there anything about this game that didn't strike you as being amazing?
Other than the rabbit butt.
That's really the only con. That's really the only con I have. The rabbit drives me crazy, but I also love it.
That's why you play the caterpillar.
But when you play with Chris, he always gets the caterpillar.
That's right.
So you never get the caterpillar.
Very easy to determine the facing of a caterpillar.
It is very easy.
This isn't necessarily a con for me. And it's definitely not a con for Talia, but it might be a con for some people. And you've hinted at this already, okay? So I just want to reiterate what you said. In a lot of ways, this game is multiplayer solitaire.
That's true.
Now, you might be saying, well, you were just saying that you could take tiles from somebody on the community board that you might be trying to go after. And that's true. But at least in the number of times I've played this, I don't feel like I've ever seen anybody take a tile on that board because they knew somebody else needed it. It's because they needed it. It just happened to be the tile they needed that you also wanted. This isn't a game where you're like, oh, I can see Cameron needs that grass tile, so I'm going to take it. You're so fixated on your board and how you're going to satisfy your animal's requirements that it's hard to see how you can mess people over on that public board. Yeah. So I think in a lot of ways, this game comes down to who was able to solve their own personal puzzle better than everybody else. That's not necessarily bad. I don't mind that, but a lot of people dislike that. They like more interaction.
I'm sure there was at least one time where I gave you my characteristic Chris, right? Chris, because you stole my tile that I wanted.
I can assure you it was unintentional.
One of the things that, and this is kind of a pretty minor quibble, really, but there is a special type of tile that they're flowers, right? And by default, they're worth 1 point. Right, you don't have to do anything to satisfy them because they're flowers.
Flowers are just satisfying.
This isn't a gardening game.
Yeah.
You don't have to do anything special to make flowers happy.
Yeah, really.
Right, so they're just worth a point, but they have a terrain type to them, so they
Right.
can be used to help satisfy other animals. I think the first few times I played this game, I was like, these flower tiles suck, and there's a lot of them. There was one game we played, they just kept coming out over and over and over again. I was like, this is boring. I don't want flower tiles. I want animals. But I think the more we played it, the more we realized that having a guaranteed 1 point is not that shabby in this game. And it is helping
than an
you...
unfinished animal.
Right, and it's helping you complete other animals.
Animals like to be next to flowers, too.
Yeah. This is not a real con. This is just a hang up that I have with this game is that there's always that I have to move in a particular direction and I can't go back. And so I always move in a particular direction, then a new tile gets filled in behind me. And that tile replacement regret is real. You move forward and you're like, oh, I'm going to grab this one because it's the best option I have. And then the tile that comes in right behind you, which you're never going to get because you can't turn around to go get it, is a perfect tile for me. And I'm like, no! So that happened a couple times. But it's just part of the game.
Yeah.
So that's a new category for reviews, tile replacement regret.
Yeah, it's going to be a new catchword.
Why can't this animal just turn around?
This animal is defective.
So shall we move on to final thoughts?
Sounds good.
Yep.
All right.
Talia?
I am going to give this game a 5.
Ooh.
I thought about giving it a 6, but I don't think I've played enough games to justify
You
being
can
able
Come
to
in here and just drop a 6 on us.
I can't just drop a 6
Talia,
like
you
that.
can give a 6 if you want to on your first episode, or you can wait 10 or more.
Yeah. I just really like how it plays. If you put it on the table right now, I would stay up to play it. I just like the game.
That's a big statement.
It's a big
Yeah.
statement.
Wow.
It's a big statement. I think
That doesn't
it's fun.
sound like 5 territory. I don't know.
That's true.
Would you play this game rather than watching Grey's Anatomy?
Oh, that's a
You're
toss-up.
not supposed to hesitate. That's not a 5.
Actually, I probably would now because Grey's it's running out.
Proves it's a 5 and not a 6, I guess.
Yeah. I like the puzzle aspect of it. I like to try to fit pieces where they go, satisfy the animals. I have also beat Chris at this game a couple times, I think.
More than a
so
couple.
any game that I can win against him is.
I would say you probably
I
have
probably need to give it a 6.
probably beaten me in this game more than I've beaten you, I would say. You're kind of a savant at this game.
What was your final number there, just for the record?
I'm gonna stick with 5.
Okay.
All right.
I'm gonna
All
stick
right.
with 5.
Some breathing room for another
yeah, you
game
got
in
to.
a
You
future
have to.
episode. All right.
That's right.
I know
Don't
what it's
get
to
easy.
hold back on the 6.
Don't get crazy.
You want to go next, Jason?
Sure. I also gave this game a 5. It's relatively quick. It's simple. The ceramic animals included, despite the rabbit, will appeal to a pretty broad audience. There's a lot to think about. It's a good puzzle. There's a good challenge here to figure out how to satisfy all the different animals. Tough decisions. I've enjoyed it every time I've played it. It's a solid game. Would happily play it again. Despite its snaking score track, which I forgot to mention as a con.
Yeah, I thought Habitats was a pretty cool game. I didn't mention it earlier, but I feel like this game also had a little bit more of a laid-back feel to it, a little slower paced, a little less intense, and I enjoyed that. Maybe that's not for everyone, but for me, I don't need every game to be a brain burner on a game night. You do that too often, it starts to feel like work. I think this game has some great decisions, planning, and I don't hate that it involves a little bit of luck. When an opponent takes a card next to you and it's replaced with exactly what you need, I'd definitely play Habitats again. I'd encourage other folks to try it out. So I'm also going to join the 5 train for Habitats. I really like it. I think it's excellent. And I would also stay up to play a round of Habitats.
Let's do it now.
I also would choose Habitats rather than watch Grey's Anatomy, if you can believe it.
Shocker.
I hate Grey's Anatomy. All right. I'm not going to beat around the bush here. I'm giving this game a 5 as well. This game is excellent.
Yeah.
This is a great game. This game has never failed. Every time I put it on the table, I played this game with many different people now, including my kids.
I was going to mention that.
Yeah, they love it. We played it with Knox the other night, and he tied me.
Nice.
He got it. He understood it. I wasn't pulling any punches. I don't do that. I don't let my kids.
No, he does not let his
He
kids
will
win.
crush.
I crush my kids into powder when I play board games with them. I have no mercy on them whatsoever. But yeah,
He loved it.
He tied me up, and it's just never missed. I know that's 5-5-5 for me, but whatever. It's my reviews. I think they're awesome games. Corney's just a great designer, and this tile lane of connecting the needs through tiles. You know, most tile lane, it's get this tile adjacent to this tile to score points. But that added layer of connecting through other tiles.
Kind of genius.
Oh, man. It's such a small thing, but it adds so much depth to being able to complete many different animals. If that rule wasn't in there, there's no way you would be able to complete all those animals.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
But because of the way you can string those tiles together, it enables you to put together some incredible point scoring opportunities, which I love. So for me, 5. Easy. Love this game.
That's awesome.
Cool. Well, I think you mentioned this as another one of the ones that was getting reprinted, but where can we find it in the meantime?
Yeah, if you want it now and you just can't wait, there are 11 copies on BGG, but as I mentioned, this is getting a reprint by Board Game Tables, and I'm sure that they'll do a knock it out of the park job on the production if you want to wait for that one. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to mention about this game. So a lot of you are probably screaming at your radio right now, this game was remade as Nova Luna. And that is correct. This game was reworked by Corné and Uwe Rosenberg as Nova Luna, which was nominated for the Spiel des Jahres in 2020.
Oh, wow.
It did not win, but it was nominated. So you may be asking yourself, well, if I have Nova Luna or if I played Nova Luna, do I need habitats? Well, I can't answer that question for you because I've not played Nova Luna, but I did research on BGG. And from the many different comments I've read, it appears that they are different enough to where you could own both. And actually, most people seem to prefer Habitats. And actually, it seems that Habitats is the more thinky and involved game.
Wow, cool.
So, again, I've not played Nova Luna, but from what I've read from people online, it seems that Habitats is thinkier and more preferred amongst people who have played both.
Okay.
So that's another good endorsement. You don't get nominated for the Spiel for nothing.
Well, it feels like we have enough love for this game in this room. Maybe I'll pick up the new one when it gets printed.
Yeah.
We'll do a flashback to see how the new art looks.
A 1-year retrospective.
Sure.
Yeah. Habitats 1 year later.
If we make it that long.
If we make it that long.
All right, well, those are our final thoughts on Habitats. Well, thank you for joining us for this Corné van Moorsel Quali Games episode of Hidden Gems. If you like what we're doing here, please remember it's a huge help to us and follow us on our various social media platforms. Check out the BGG Guild if you want to interact with us. If you'd leave us a rating or review on your podcast platform of choice, or share a game that you think is a hidden gem. And until next time, I'm your host, Cameron.
This is Chris.
This is Jason.
And I'm Talia.
Thanks for listening. This episode of Hidden Gems, number 10, was recorded in Raleigh, North Carolina on June 17, 2021. Join us in 2 weeks when we talk about the history of the Spiel des Jahres Awards, run through a list of previous winners, and then review 3 Forgotten Spiel Award recipients. Hidden Gems is produced and edited by Chris Alley, Cameron Lockey, and Jason Yanchuleff. Our show's logo was illustrated by designer and artist Katelyn Nieto. Check out her work on Instagram at It's Katelyn Nieto. We would love to hear from you. Feel free to join the discussion on our many social media accounts. You can find us on Facebook at Hidden Gems Board Game Podcast, Instagram at hiddengems.podcast, and Twitter at Hidden Gems Board. Disagree with one of our reviews? Have something you want to say about one of the games we discussed today? You can also make your voice heard on our Board Game Geek Guild at BoardGameGeek.com. Once again, thank you for joining us on Hidden Gems, and until next time, fellow gem seekers, enjoy your games and enjoy your search.
Hidden Gems, Episode 10, Tasty Moorsels.
We're not going to be able to get through this episode.
Oh, man. Okay. Hidden Gems, Episode 10. Tasty morsels, though, man. I'm trying real hard. I'm sorry. I think it's because Talia's in here. Okay. Hidden Gems, Episode 10.
We've never had this problem before. This episode... Are we done?
Silence in the room, please.
Would you like to share that with the class, Talia?
I'm trying to give you something.
Trying to read the credits.
I'm trying to give you something for your bloopers.